Novak Djokovic has broken his silence after wisely laying low throughout the course of the Australian Open and the week to follow. He has finally gone on the record and given an interview about the events that transpired before the Australian Open when he got a medical exemption. He flew to Australia. He was then deported. He appealed, got to stay in the country in detention, won his first appeal, lost his second appeal, and then was physically kicked out of the country and didn't play the Australian Open. So we now have Novak's perspective, his updated vaccine stance, and his point of view of those events. So we're going to read this article from the BBC. Novak Djokovic willing to miss tournaments over vaccine. The author was Amol Rahan, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And we're going to read this article. But first, I just want to give a shout out to our friends at PlayYourCourt. PlayYourCourt is the place to go if you need a local coach, practice partner, or match. Personally, I just moved to LA. I need people to play with, so I've just turned to PlayYourCourt. Signing up was extremely easy, user-friendly. I know the number one reason people quit tennis is because they can't find someone to play with, and I don't want that to happen to you. So if you use my special link in the description, I've arranged a special 50% off discount for you to join the PlayYourCourt community, which is a big one, and get the practice matches you need to improve your game. All right, so let's jump into this article. Novak Djokovic has said he would rather miss out on future tennis trophies than to be forced to get a COVID vaccine. Speaking exclusively to the BBC, he said missing competitions such as the French Open over his jab status was, quote, the price that I'm willing to pay. The 20-time Grand Slam winner was deported from Australia last month after the government canceled his visa in a row over his vaccine status. Djokovic described the conditions while he was detained as, quote, very hard. He said he had not spoken out in the media at the time despite wanting to, as he wanted to respect the legal process and the Australian Open. The world's number one tennis player also said he should not be associated with the anti-vax movement, but supported an individual's right to choose. I feel like that word shouldn't be but, it should be and. Anyway, that's if I were the editor. Okay. He said he had obtained a medical exemption to enter the country to play the Australian Open as he had recently recovered from COVID-19. Yeah, we know that. However, the country's immigration minister, Alex Hawke, personally canceled the 34-year-old's visa on the grounds that his presence could incite civil unrest and encourage anti-vaccine sentiment. Quote, I was never against vaccination, he told the BBC, confirming he'd had vaccines as a child, but I've always supported that the freedom to choose what you put in your body. So this first part is kind of a summary of what's to come in the rest of the piece where Djokovic goes into more specifics, but it sets the tone for the article, which is this. First of all, that Novak is willing to make sacrifices for his desire to not take the vaccine, that these are sacrifices he's ready and willing to take. That's the first point. The second point is that he wants to uncouple himself from this anti-vaccine label. And the third part is making it clear exactly what went down in Australia from his point of view, which, as I'll get into, I think is all correct and factually accurate, which is why his visa was canceled by Minister Alex Hawke. So as we keep reading, we'll get more into what Novak said specifically. Here's the second part. Djokovic said he hoped vaccination requirements in certain tournaments would change, adding he was hoping he can, quote, play for many more years, but also confirmed he was willing to forego the chance to become statistically the greatest male tennis player of all time because he felt so strongly. Djokovic's rival, Rafael Nadal, has won 21 Grand Slam singles titles, the most of any male competitor. Asked why, Djokovic replied, because the principles of decision-making on my body are more important than any title or anything else. I'm trying to be in tune with my body as much as I possibly can. Djokovic said he had, quote, always been a great student of wellness, well-being, health, nutrition, and his decision had been partially influenced by the positive impact factors such as changing his diet and his sleeping patterns had on his abilities as an athlete. So let me just stop right there. I think this first part is important. It's exactly what I had expected would be kind of Novak's outlook on this, which is that he expects to play at the highest level for many, many more years. He feels that time is on his side, and there's not going to be any panic in him as a result of Nadal winning a 21st Grand Slam. And I think he's very content just waiting for vaccine restrictions to ease, waiting for the pandemic to hopefully in part pass, or in large part pass, and then he will be ready to compete at the highest level and win the biggest titles. This quote, that when he said, I hope I can play for many more years, I really think that he believes, and I know he didn't say this, but the point of this video is also to, provide further analysis and context to what he's saying. I think Djokovic feels that he is going to significantly outlast both Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. And that is giving him a certain comfort that is enabling him to stay true to what his principles are here. And he feels no desperation to act against what he feels is best for his body. And then he gets into kind of how he feels like changing his diet and his sleep has helped him as an athlete. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how relevant that is to his decision, other than he takes great care in what he puts in his body and how he feels is the best way to take care of his body. So that is, I guess, the relevant background and why that matters in this situation. Okay, now the next part here. He said he was, quote, keeping his mind open about the possibility of being vaccinated in the future because we are all trying to find collectively a best possible solution to end COVID. Quote, I was never against vaccination. I understand that globally everyone is trying to put a big effort into handling this virus and seeing hopefully an end soon to the virus. So this gets into a larger point, and I think one of the main points that Djokovic went into when he began this interview, which was, I'm trying to get rid of this anti-vax label. I don't want to be that. I'm not that. And I think it is important to give Novak the acknowledgement of that. I can respect that desire because of how charged and almost slur-like that term has become. Anti-vax is not something that I think a lot of people are rushing to be a part of. People are not really trying to be seen as anti-vax. And Novak has not been someone who has advocated against the vaccine writ large. He has not been someone who has spread any misinformation about the vaccine. He has not been vocal in trying to get others to follow his lead when it comes to the vaccine. And in that respect, I think we see that there are many shades of gray here when it comes to people who choose not to get vaccinated, that they're not all really the same. Now, I think under some definitions, some traditional definitions of anti-vaccine, it does refer to an individual's refusal to take it. Now, I think there are other definitions that maybe have to do more with the advocation and the active vocalization of that stance. And if you don't partake in any of that, then you're not anti-vax. it's not very clear cut because the definition is so vague and umbrella like. It just says really opposed to vaccines. Novak in this case is obviously opposed to the vaccine as an individual choice individually, but he's not opposed to others taking the vaccine, and he's pro-choice. Now, I think that most people who don't take the vaccine, the vast majority of people who don't take the vaccine, I believe, are in Novak's camp. They don't care if anyone else takes it, right? I mean, to be honest with you, I haven't seen a lot of people at all take issue with other people taking the vaccine. They don't care, right? They don't give a crap if other people take the vaccine. They don't want to be forced to take the vaccine, right? That is what the crux of the issue is here. It is against mandates. And so, I mean, I don't know if we are reducing the anti-vax movement to the people who are anti-free choice when it comes to vaccine, and anti-mandate and anti-taking it themselves, then I don't really think there's a very large anti-vax movement at all. If the parameters are that narrow, then I don't really think really a lot of people even fit into that in the first place. So it was interesting. I was talking on Twitter about kind of with some people about what their definition of anti-vax is, and it changes a little bit. It can change for different people. But I think the fact that anti-vax has become such a charged word, I completely respect Novak's desire to not have anything to do with that label. Completely understand where he's coming from. And it's fair enough, really. It's definitely fair enough. Djokovic told the BBC his experience in Australia was, quote, tough. It was very, very hard. While I was still at the airport, I couldn't use my phone for 3-4 hours. I was lost, really. I didn't know what was happening. He said initially he could not get in touch with his family, but was later allowed to access his phone when he was inside the detention center. More than 10 billion doses of COVID vaccines have been administered, and about 6 in 10 people globally have had at least one. So there is a wealth of information. Like all medicines, COVID vaccines have potential side effects, but their safety profile is excellent. They have saved countless lives, prevented serious illness, and may also be protective against long COVID. These vaccines were developed in record time, but much of vaccine development usually surrounds funding delays. Scientists involved in the COVID vaccine trials and the regulators who approved them say no corners were cut on safety. Some rare side effects did only show up once the jab started being rolled out among millions of people, which is why regulators kept monitoring safety week by week. It is hard to know what more Novak Djokovic needs to know. He says he doesn't have enough information about the vaccine, as if there was just one COVID jab. There are many. As an elite athlete, he is at low risk from COVID, but not zero. He's had it twice after all. So this is now the BBC journalist giving context around the vaccine. I am not going to add anything or talk about any of that portion. But I guess I should address Djokovic saying that he does have an open mind about taking the vaccine in the future and saying that he doesn't have enough information. I do agree that there's no more new information that is going to come out here. Vaccine's been out for a year. Lots of information is out there. I can't imagine. I really, truly cannot imagine that there is going to be some new info that sheds light on the vaccine in a way that has a person like Novak Djokovic saying, okay, there we go, I'll take it now. I really can't see that. I mean, we pretty much know what the vaccine is at this point and what it does. So I don't know. I would rather him say, to be honest with you, I have the information. I've done the research. I understand what the vaccine is about here, and I vote no on it. I choose not to take it. I'd much rather him say that than I'm waiting on more information. You know, that's not happening. The information has been, I believe, transmitted. Now, I mean, maybe 3 years down the road, 4 years, maybe even 10 years down the road, we'll have an idea, or I guess more of a comfort in the idea that there's no long-term harmful effect. But obviously, when it comes to all vaccines, whenever they're new, you're never really going to know that. While awaiting his first court hearing, Djokovic was free to train, but it was not the regular kind of training days that I would normally have prior to the Grand Slam competition, he said. I had helicopters flying above every single training session that I had on Rod Laver Arena, cameras all over the place. Also, I felt that energy and that those looks from my colleagues and people that were in the tennis facility, that really hurt me a lot. And obviously, I understand that they had a perception that was based on what they were seeing from media reports, and I wasn't going out in the media because of what was previously said in respecting the legal process and respecting the Australian Open. But at the time, I really wanted to speak to everyone and give my explanation. In our interview, Djokovic also addressed speculation about the sequence of the events ahead of the Australian Open in January. Some had suggested it was convenient that Djokovic's positive COVID case in mid-December had occurred just in time for him to be granted a medical exemption to attend the tournament. I understand there is a lot of criticism. This is a quote. And I understand that people come out with different theories on how lucky I was or how convenient it is. But no one is lucky and convenient of getting COVID. Millions of people have and are struggling with COVID around the world. So I take this very seriously. I really don't like someone thinking that I've misused something in my own favor in order to, get a positive PCR test and eventually go to Australia. Asked if he was aware of any attempt to tamper with either of the tests he had done for COVID earlier this month, BBC research cast doubt on the timing of a positive test. He flatly said no. All right. Yeah, I mean, all of this kind of nothing to add to any of this. Djokovic is by any measure a remarkable individual, raised amid two wars in the former Yugoslavia by parents who sold the family gold and negotiated with loan sharks to fund his ambitions. He is fluent in 6 languages, arguably the greatest player ever to pick up a racket, and most pertinently, a deeply committed libertarian who believes strongly in individual autonomy. He has clearly thought deeply about the conflict between individual autonomy and the collective good, and he feels that as an elite sportsman, his body is his business in both senses of that word. He says he has an open mind, but as things stand, he will not get the jab. His medical exemption request was made anonymously, and it was accepted by 2 independent Australian panels. However, there was a separate travel declaration which included an error. Quote, absolutely the visa declaration error was not deliberately made. It was accepted and confirmed by the federal court and the minister himself in the Ministry for Immigration in Australia. So actually what people probably don't know is that I was not deported from Australia on the basis that I was not vaccinated, or I broke any rules, or that I made an error in my visa declaration. All of that was actually approved and validated by the Federal Court of Australia and the Minister for Immigration. The reason I was deported from Australia was because the Minister for Immigration used his discretionary powers to cancel my visa based on his perception that I might create some anti-vax sentiment in the country or in the city, which I completely disagree with. Djokovic is set to return at the Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships, which begin next week, where entrants need not to be vaccinated. That is true. That is how I covered the situation. That is what I tried to explain to people in my coverage of the situation, that Djokovic, in the end, the exemption was not disproven as valid, and it wasn't the fact that he wasn't vaccinated or that he didn't have a valid exemption. That was not the reason he was deported, but it was, again, the political ramifications of Djokovic being allowed in the country as determined by Alex Hawke. And I did think it was unfortunate that situation got so political. And I think it's important that what Djokovic said gets out there into the world, because I think the mainstream perception among people, especially those who don't follow the story as closely as presumably I did, or even the folks watching this video, the perception is that Djokovic tried to get into the country despite not being vaccinated, even though the rules said that he had to be, and he was deported as a result of not being vaccinated. That, I think, is the mainstream perception if you were not reading the fine print and following the cases carefully, if you were not if you were only looking at headlines, if you were only reading certain portions of mainstream social media. I do think that that's a mainstream takeaway. That's unfortunate. And Novak's effort to change that narrative and to get that fact out there, I think, or those facts out there, I think is important. So ultimately, we are left with a couple of things here. Again, I think the anti-vax label is murky, and I respect his effort to try to rid himself of that label. I respect the fact that he is trying to get his events out in the world. As it comes to as it pertains to his tennis and his decision to not get vaccinated and to stand by those feelings, to not cave into the external pressures, and to sacrifice his place in some of these major tournaments in 2021. At the end of the day, you know, it's either we turn around and Novak is Icarus, and this is going to cost him, and that his confidence in his longevity will be misplaced, and that these sacrifices will indeed be costly when it comes to the Grand Slam race. Or maybe he will be correct. Maybe he will be right, and he will cost himself a couple of big tournaments here, but in the long run, he will be able to achieve what he wants to achieve anyway. Only time will ultimately tell. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.